Hello everybody and welcome back to Drums and Drams. My name is Cameron and you're probably wondering why the heck I am dressed this way tonight. And actually that's a little bit of a silly question because I think any of you would be wearing exactly what I have on right now if you were about to drink this liquid gold that you see in front of me. And yes, I did just get done playing an orchestra concert and I just got home from that. Nothing screams sophisticated post-concert pour like a massively unnecessary and over-branded line extension of a bottom shelf product from the Buffalo Trace Distillery. Yes, the same Buffalo Trace Distillery that can hardly keep up with the demand of their higher quality premium price products. That same distillery decided that the next best thing was to go ahead and unleash 5 brand new benchmark offerings on the state of Indiana. I don't know what they were thinking. But all jokes aside, I'm excited to do this review. I know this is really late. A lot of these bottles have been on the shelves in Indiana for quite some time now, and there already exist some videos in the Whiskey Tube community about this lineup. But I knew that I wanted to kind of throw my hat in the mix and do a review of all of these. So with that said, I've got a couple of things I want to cover before we get to the actual tasting. This is going to be probably a little bit of a longer video. I'm going to go ahead and warn you up front because we do have 6 pours here to take care of. So first order of business, I have to thank my good friend here in Columbus, Ohio, Nick Allen, for providing these bottles and also providing them as unopened bottles and allowing me to break the seal, which is just a really cool thing to be able to do on camera here with all of you. He even threw in a standard benchmark, not from the line extension, because I didn't have one. So the last time I tasted benchmark was, I don't even know how many years ago, so my frame of reference is basically non-existent, and that's good. I wanted to go into this with as little bias as I possibly could. Next thing is, as a result of borrowing these bottles from Nick, I promised him I would give them the white glove treatment. So fresh from the Amazon warehouse, we're gonna go ahead and throw these bad boys on. And of course, this is not my normal setup. You can see that we are down here in my basement studio. I am a percussionist. Like I said, I just got done playing an orchestra concert, and this is where I do all of my practicing. So I've got my gong behind me, my vibraphone. We're using my marimba as a table. That's not great, but we're doing it. So you get to see a little different thing going on down here than we usually do up in the bourbon room upstairs. The offerings that we're gonna be taking a look at, regular old benchmark, we have small batch, single barrel, top floor, bonded, and the foolproof offering. So that's what we've got on the table today. I don't think there's anything else that I really need to say now. We're just gonna go ahead and get into it. Like I said earlier, it's gonna be a bit of a longer video. The delivery might be a little, you know, that stream of consciousness type thing. So if that's the case, I'm gonna do my best to edit this up and make it as short as possible. But like I said, you get one shot, so bear with me. Let's get to it. We're gonna go ahead and pour the regular old benchmark. We're gonna pour this as sort of our first baseline pour here. And gotta do the two-handed pour. Gotta do the old fancy pants two-handed pour. And I'll go ahead and crack a few of these right now, maybe all of them, just so I can get them, you know, get some air in these. Allow them to sit out because every one of these is going to be a neck pour. Also didn't realize how tough it was gonna be in these slick white gloves to get these pours going. Yeah, this is probably gonna be one of those parts of the video that I edit out, but who knows. Okay, so now that everything has been poured out, let's go ahead and start with the regular old benchmark here. Get a little nose and taste of this baseline pour for the evening. Okay, so that's not great. Damp honey, damp cardboard. No real spice to speak of. I mean, I'm not really getting anything like that on the nose. Yeah, just very, very sweet, almost a floral quality to this, reminding you of like a little bit of like that Glenmorangie 10 type floral quality. But yeah, with that really, really light honey, maybe a tinge of light caramel in there. Imagine, you know, Buffalo Trace, but watered down and worse. So not great here on the nose. This is coming in at 40% ABV. So it's gonna be the lowest ABV of the lineup today. Let's check it out on the palate. Cheers. It's easygoing, but astringent at the same time because it is such a cheap and young product. You get a lot of ethanol combining with some like heavy corn grain notes, that light honey that Buffalo Trace is known for, and yeah, that cardboard thing that people talk about with Buffalo Trace, very, very apparent here. One more sip. And there is a little bit of spice. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. It's almost just like peppery in a way. It's not heavy baking spices or cinnamon or anything like that necessarily. It's kind of hard to read, so I'd say somewhere between a light cinnamon and a little bit of cracked black pepper. The finish is extremely short, next to no mouthfeel at this ABV and at this age. So yeah, that is the standard benchmark, and that is going to be my benchmark for the video today. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move on now. The first pour of the line extension this evening is going to be the small batch at 90 proof. It says select barrels are chosen for this small batch Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey by our master distiller. The aroma of vanilla and oak gives way to delightful hints of caramel, leather, and honey. Sounds more or less like what I would expect, but oak at this age, I believe these are all around maybe like 3 years old or something like that. They're really young. So let's see what we get here. Definitely a little bit of a richer, heavier presence than the standard benchmark. We can do that side by side just very quickly. Yeah, you definitely get a little more of a more filled out profile, if that makes sense. I wouldn't call it heavy or anything like that, but it's definitely a little bit richer on the nose than the standard benchmark. Same type of thing though. What you lose here is a little bit of that cardboard, that like really, really cheap note on the nose. You lose that just a bit in favor of some additional honey, like not quite as watery smelling with the honey flavors and that really light caramel going on. I mean, fruit-wise, I'm not sure that there's really much in here. I might change my mind on that once I come back to the nose after this first sip. So let's take our first sip of small batch 90 proof benchmark. Not half bad. I mean, it's not something I'm gonna reach for every day, but the profile is so much more filled out. Now, this is gonna be maybe a deceptive video actually, because I haven't had any bourbon for this evening at all. So I'm not really comparing this to anything right now. So by the time I get to the full proof, I might be loving my life because I'm not putting this next to anything that's actually good. I have no idea. There could be a hint of light fruit in here, but it's not super apparent. Yeah, same kind of thing. There is a little bit of oak. Of course, there's vanilla in here too. I haven't mentioned that yet. There is a little bit of oak, but it's really light oak. It's nothing tannic, nothing really heavy about it. The finish is going on right now. Hangs on a bit in the back of the throat with some spice. In the palate, it's a little bit drying, but it's not like tannic oak drying. It just kind of takes the moisture out of your mouth, I guess. Last sip of the small batch now. Yeah, there's that same ethanol corn grain thing going on here as the first glass of original benchmark, but it's just not as astringent, not as thin. So a better experience overall. Yeah, and I'm gonna keep coming back to the regular benchmark again to try to just have a point of reference and level myself between these pours. So let me have just a quick sip of water and then we're gonna get to the single barrel. I feel like a whiskey sommelier right now. I'm dressed so ridiculously. All right, let's go ahead and get to the single barrel. This one is slightly higher proof than the small batch. We are at 95 proof now. And the bottle says, only the best barrels are selected. I bet they are. While every barrel is unique, each reflects the utmost standard for the finest taste and most smooth finish with every pour. If by smooth finish, you probably mean no finish, agreed. Let's go ahead and do this benchmark single barrel offering now. 95 proof. Yeah, there's just more presence to this because it's probably higher proof, I would guess. Maybe a little bit more fruitiness on the nose here, maybe like some really light summer fruits, like red summer fruits or something like that. Some sort of berry note. I'm gonna go side by side with a small batch and see, if there's a noticeable difference. Oh yeah, actually there's quite a bit of a difference. Yeah, the small batch really retains that almost like ground or dusty corn grain type characteristic on the nose, whereas the single barrel largely eliminates that. Yeah, it kind of gets rid of that and introduces like almost like a strawberry flavor in there in place of that, and amps up the honey even more now. So it seems like, as the proof has increased, as we've gone from benchmark to small batch to single barrel, and we've decreased batch size, it seems like the flavors come more into focus here, which makes a lot of sense. And we're getting a little bit more fruitiness, a little bit more of a rounded out profile, which is nice. The rest of it is pretty much the same thing. Those honeys, light caramels, vanilla. Now we have maybe a strawberry or a light summer fruit note. You can tell now, like if you aged this product even more to the point of a Blanton's or of a Rock Hill Farms. I know we're not in the same mash bill here, but if you aged it up to, let's say, E.H. Taylor single barrel, you can see where the fruity notes come from over the course of time. You can see that now we've started to introduce that single barrel fruity characteristic here, and everyone talks about that like grape note that they get from a lot of Buffalo Trace Mash Bill 1 products, even Mash Bill 2 sometimes. It's evident that this is the starting point for that. So that's kind of an interesting thing to be able to check out here in this lineup. So let's try the single barrel on the palate now. Cheers. Pretty decent mouthfeel. I've got to say I'm surprised. The corn grain is now back. I don't think that's probably ever going to go away with any of these. I can't imagine it would because they're so young. It comes back on the palate, but the overall like density and viscosity of the palate is it's night and day between the single barrel and the small batch even. So we have really almost exponentially improved as we've gone up this lineup, and we're only on the third pour of 6. So that's a good sign. It's impressive. And these things over in Indiana, I'm not sure that this one has a price tag on it, but I think my foolproof bottle here does $18.99. Not a bad price, especially for a foolproof. I know that's likely the most expensive one of the bunch, but around 15 bucks probably for some of these. Not bad here on the single barrel. Let me have one more sip. The additional proof really helps this one. It starts to bring in more oak, which is really nice. And you would expect that probably from a single barrel product like this. More oak influence. The thing that's really improving here is the finish. Like typically the finishes of these other two have just sat in the back of the throat with a little bit of spice, a little bit of ethanol. This is still remaining in the palate, even right now, drying the palate out just a little bit. You can chew on it, you can get a little bit of light oak, and it does still hang on in the back of the throat as well, but this is a more balanced finish here on the single barrel, and I really like that. I also I'm feeling so ridiculous in these white gloves, but I have to leave them on. All right. The next one is an interesting bottle, and I couldn't decide where to put this in the lineup. I probably should have put it down a little bit lower because the proof is not in line. We are now dropping 9 proof points from 95 with the single barrel to 86 on the top floor. As many of you know, if you age bourbon on the top floor of a rick house, it's gonna age faster because heat rises. And so it's going to absorb more of the flavors of the barrel quicker. I shouldn't say age faster necessarily, but it's going to have a more significant impact and influence from the barrel on the actual distillate inside. So with that said, we have a top floor batched product here at 86 proof, and the description on the bottle says bourbon that matures on the top warehouse floors tend to age faster as heat rises. There you go. This top floor Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey is smooth and well-rounded. Everything is smooth, apparently. Well-rounded to be enjoyed straight with ice or in your favorite cocktail. Whatever. That's not telling me much of anything. Let me quickly nose this and see what we get on this top floor offering. So this is an interesting one. The biggest difference that I'm getting right now is the fruitiness on the nose here. So let me pull this single barrel back out and do a little side by side before I kind of tell you all about it. It's interesting. I actually think that the order here was correct. I think that including the top floor, almost said top shelf. None of these things are top shelf. The top floor in fourth here, I think it was actually the right call. Even though the proof is lower and you can kind of tell that on the nose just a bit, the actual influence of the barrel, like we talked about, is actually obvious. The one thing that separates this from the single barrel is the amount of fruitiness and specifically grape in here. I just talked about how you get a lot of grape on Mash Bill 1 and even Mash Bill 2, but I really get it on the E.H. Taylor stuff, and you can start to really get that grape here on this top floor product. It's gotta be a result of that extra heat up there and the barrel influence on the distillate. And again, when I go side by side, just as I have as we work down the line, the previous glass has more corn grain than the new glass that I'm tasting. So it's like as we're working our way down, we're getting less and less of that cheap corn grain flavor. And for me, that's a good thing. So let me quickly go from this original benchmark. Let me do a quick nosing down the line just to humor myself. Yeah, it's totally obvious. This first one is just god awful. Oh my god. Then you get to the small batch, it starts to round out more with a fuller honey profile. You get to the single barrel, it starts to become a more balanced profile with a higher proof. And then you get to top floor, and I actually like the nose on this one the best so far. Even though I wish the proof could be higher, it's only 86. So like I said, additional grape here, everything else pretty much in line. With the lowered proof, you're really not getting as much spice on the nose at all. These last two had a bit more spice than this top floor. Let's try it on the palate. Cheers. The actual body of flavors in this one is impressive. That's what I really like about it. The mouthfeel was thinner, more watery, but it has more of a rounded profile in terms of its fruitiness. And I think that's a good thing. And actually more oak, which would make sense. On that top floor with that barrel influence, you're going to get more oak in the actual bourbon itself. So top floor, more impressive than I thought. And from some previous reviews that I had seen, I think people said that this was just absolutely god awful. I don't dislike it as much as some of the others. We might come back to that, we might not. We're gonna keep it moving. I wanna go ahead and get to the end of this video. We're going to now take a look at the bottled and bond version of Benchmark. I'm gonna read the label very quickly. The Bottled and Bond Act of 1897 set strict standards for bonded whiskey. This 100 proof Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey aged 4 years to meet those standards. Enjoy the rich flavor and long, smooth finish. Again, with the smooth finish. So, as you can expect, this is 100 proof. We are now jumping back up to the highest proof of the bunch so far. Let's go ahead and see what we get on the nose here. I'm eagerly anticipating this one, maybe the most out of the lineup, but of course the full proof as well. So, Bottled and Bond on the nose. Yeah, more vanilla, I guess, than some of the others. The proof is evident, but it's not bringing more oak. Nor is it bringing more like fruitiness, at least right now. Maybe I'll do a side by side and maybe I'll be completely wrong about that. But the vanilla is very obvious. Let's compare it next to the top floor. 14 proof points difference, but that's okay. So first the bonded, yeah, definite ethanol there. Top floor. All right, well the top floor is a little bit sweeter. But again, like you go to the next pour, the last one smells like more corn grain. So I don't know what this progression is, as I feel like I'm continuing to lose that corn grain influence as we go. Maybe I'm just crazy and I've set up an expectation for myself, but maybe that's really how it's going. Either way, the bonded whiskey lost more of the corn grain in favor of extra vanillas, essentially. And not quite as much fruitiness as the top floor. The top floor has some more grape in it. This is now back to the kind of like summer fruit, maybe berry, you know, that kind of vibe going on. So 4 years old, at least probably only 4 years old. Let's check out the bonded version of Benchmark on the palate. There we go. I had the expectation that the bonded whiskey would have that kind of mouthfeel that it just had, and that balance from front palate, mid palate into the finish. It's solid, right? I mean, that felt like a whiskey to me. It felt like I was drinking a better whiskey than I am right now because of the proof, because of the more filled out profile there, much in the way that the single barrel had a really nice finish that not only was in the throat but also in the mouth and in the palate. This one has that same sort of thing going on. So we have some lingering spice in the back of the throat, but in the palate, it's hanging on there. More oak. This is the most oak that I've gotten so far, I believe. The top floor had a good amount, kind of combined with those grape notes. This is more of a straight up, like heavier oak profile in the finish, and I really like it. The bonded is definitely far and away the best one so far, although I do still like elements of the top floor in small ways, and the single barrel was decently impressive, but mainly because I was comparing it to the small batch. All right, one more sip here. Again, the vanilla is overwhelming. One more sip of the bottled in bond version. Yeah, solid. All right, so the moment that I've been waiting for, maybe you've been waiting for it as well. I have, taken it out a little bit on Buffalo Trace here today, but I was genuinely curious about the foolproof version of Benchmark. So let's see how the heck this stacks up. Let me read the label very quickly for you. This Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey is bottled at the same proof that it enters the barrel, bold and robust. This 125 proof unveils hints of chocolate, brown sugar, and spice. Sip and savor. Nothing about smooth on here. So if they put smooth on this one, and some average, 80 proof whiskey drinker comes in, picks this thing up and sees smooth, they'd probably be sorely disappointed when their mouth is on fire. So kudos to not writing the word smooth on 1 of 5 bottles, basically. All right, let's check out foolproof on the nose. Huh. You would never know that this is a foolproof whiskey. Maybe it's starting to come into focus a little bit. Yeah, it's not like the proof jumps out of the glass at all. It actually might be the most muted on the nose. Oh, it definitely is. It's very weird. It's like everything is just kind of contained and constricted a little bit in the glass. I might have to throw a little bit of water in this. But before I do, I can smell. It's not necessarily ethanol. It's almost like because the proof is ramped up, even though this is mash bill number 1, the low rye mash bill, it's almost like the rye influence on the whiskey is ramped up because of the proof. So I'm getting a little bit of like rye spice. Let me go ahead and try this on the palate before I go any further. That is weird. That has got to be the most out of balance, foolproof bourbon I have ever tried. It's almost like there are layers. It's like oil and water. It's like one of them is the pepper and the rye spice and the proof, all of that, but then it's just being masked by some sort of watery type layer, which is the actual flavor of the bourbon itself, the honey thing that you would get from Buffalo Trace, and that slight fruitiness. And then when it hits your palate, those things remain separated. They don't actually integrate where it would explode in your mouth and kind of like wake you up as a foolproof or barrel-proof bourbon would. They remain separated, and all of the burn relegates itself to the back palate and into the finish, and the palate remains watery. That is so crazy weird. And remember, these are all neck pours, but because we're talking about the Benchmark vertical, I'm not expecting that these things are going to improve that much, Very, very weird. I'm going to do one more sip. A little more integrated that time. Mid palate actually had a little bit more kick. It wasn't all relegated to the back palate, but that first sip was one of the strangest sips of bourbon I've ever had. It didn't make any sense. I don't like that. That's so weird. I actually like the bottled and bond the most. And maybe the single barrel second. It's almost like the bottled and bond for me is the most balanced. You get just a little bit of everything that you would want from this without having too high of expectations. Single barrel and top floor, maybe a bit of a tie, maybe give the edge to the single barrel. It's more balanced. You could throw foolproof in there next. I might tie foolproof and top floor for third. Foolproof is just too out of whack for me. Even if you like proof, it's just freaking weird. And it's not like the honey or the sweetness or the richness of the oak got amplified with the proof. All that got amplified was black pepper and rye spice and ethanol. So I don't know, maybe that's a tie for third with the top floor. And then small batch would sit in fifth. And of course, the regular benchmark you could all expect would sit in last place. That's all I've got today. This was a long video. I'm gonna do my best to trim it down. I'm so sorry, but I wanted to do this. Thank you again, Nick, for lending me these bottles. That's a really awesome thing for you to do. Make sure to give it the old white glove treatment, like I said. For those of you who are checking out this video, please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification if you want to be notified of things coming up, especially live streams, which are every Thursday night at this point at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Like the video, do all those good YouTube things. You know, check me out on Instagram, find me on Facebook, send me an email, drumsanddrams@gmail.com in the description below. If you have anything, you know, any suggestions for the channel, anything you want me to try, any samples to send in, we can talk about that. Want to make sure that everything's legit with the samples. What else? I think that might be all. I usually end my videos with a pour. I'm gonna end it with the bottled and bond version of Benchmark. That's the one I would recommend for all of you. If you wanna spend another 15 to 18 bucks, you could go a lot of different ways. Maybe go for the single barrel next. Those are the two most worthwhile for me. Foolproof out of balance, top floor interesting, more fruity, more grapey, and then small batch and benchmark, you know, I'm gonna say no go on those. So Buffalo Trace, I don't know why you did this. I don't know why you sent him to Indiana. This was pretty much unnecessary. I think we were all good to go. Let's just make some more Eagle Rare or something like that people like. So cheers to all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm gonna go take this penguin suit off right now. Cheers, everybody. See you later. All right, I'm done.